Hello, this is going to be a video about genes that differ along the racial spectrum. It's also going to be somewhat of a response to EvoGen videos. I'm going to go over genetic differences in health and disease, the brain and intelligence and behavior. And something I want you folks to remember is that although all humans, for the most part, have the same genes, the percentage of a population with any given allele can vary from 0 to 100%. Now, I decided to respond to Evo Gen because I think out of all of the people on that side of the argument, he makes the most coherent arguments. Um, I do appreciate his videos, but I don't agree with them, obviously. Now, in one of his videos where he addresses Spalk Talk, at around 11 minutes into it, he says that the only genetic differences between the races are genes that code for skin, hair, and eye color. Well, I'm going to set about proving him wrong in this statement. I'm going to talk about a handful of genes that are known to differ among the races, and it's going to be in health and disease, behavior, and the brain and intelligence. Okay, we're going to start with a gene called LCT, also called the lactase gene. It has an allele that enables adults to digest milk sugar. It is very common in Northern Europeans. Over 90% of the population has it, but the vast majority of Asians and Africans do not. Okay, now we have a gene labeled CCR5. It has a deletion that some people believe came about as a protection against smallpox. Only a small percentage of Europeans have this deletion, 1%, although 10% of European Jews have it. It protects them from the AIDS virus, but it increases the risk of illnesses like West Nile virus. It is not found in Asians or Africans. Also, we have a gene labeled CYP3A5, which is a salt retention gene for the kidneys. There's an allele for this gene that is far more common in Eurasians than Africans. There is also a gene called AGT-M235 that's also involved in salt retention that has similar population distributions. Gene HBB has an allele, and if you have a single copy of this allele, it protects you against malaria, but two copies of this allele causes sickle cell anemia. It is found, is most commonly found in people living in Africa and India. Gene LTA4H, an allele in this gene increases the risks of a heart attack in African Americans by more than 250%, but only by 16% in whites and Asians. The gene itself boosts inflammation as a way to fight infections, and it is generally not found in Africans. Gene APOH is a autoantigen for the production of antibodies in autoimmune diseases. It has an allele that is present in only blacks, and it's identical to the to a type it's identical to an allele found in chimpanzees. Gene NOS2 is a gene that is for producing nitric oxide. An allele is possessed by Africans in malaria areas, which increases the production of nitric oxide, which protects against the symptoms of the disease. Caucasians do not have that allele. Gene CNDP1 has a repeat sequence that protects Caucasian Europeans, white Americans, and Arabs, but not blacks, from diabetic end-stage kidney failure. Okay, now I'm going to get into the brain and intelligence. Gene DAB1, it's a gene that's involved in organizing the layers of cells in the cerebral cortex. A version of this gene has become universal in the Chinese, but not other places. Gene EST00083, it's an mtDNA polymorphism that's found more often in high IQ groups. It's common in Europe, not so much in Asia. Gene ASPM, it has alleles that affect the size of the brain. Defects in the ASPM gene lead to small brains and low IQ. Its alleles are suspected in increasing intelligence in Eurasia. It's common in Eurasians, but it's absent in Africans and chimpanzees. People who speak tonal languages are more likely to carry two newer alleles of this gene. Gene MCPH1, the alleles of this gene at least partly determine brain size and or organization. There are new alleles of this gene that are common in Eurasians but rare in Africans and absent in chimpanzees. And to be fair, there has been some controversy over these genes. Some people say it affects IQ, some people don't. I'm just going to throw that in there just to be fair. I'm also going to give you this quote. Whatever advantages these genes ASPM and MCPH1 give, some groups have it and some don't. This has to be the worst nightmare for people who believe strongly there are no differences in brain function between groups. And that was by anthropologist John Hawkes. Okay, now I'm going to get into genes associated with behavior. It's been described as a key component of the mammalian circadian clock machinery. There has been significant difference in the distribution of this gene's polymorphisms between Africans and non-Africans. Gene ACTN3, it codes for fast twitch muscle fibers. There are differences in deficiencies of certain alleles produced by this gene. 25% of Asian populations are deficient, 18% of Europeans, only less than 1% of the African Bantu population is deficient of this allele. Gene MAOA, also called the violence gene, it's believed to be important in the regulation of aggression and impulsivity. Different ethnic groups have different alleles of this gene. Now keep in mind, guys, this was just a handful of genetic differences between the races that I just listed. There's many, many more. Obviously, Evogen was incorrect in saying that the only differences were skin, hair, and eye color. I also want to add that humans have more what's called junk DNA than any other animal, and the functions of this junk DNA are beginning to be discovered, and we can expect to find important racial differences in them as well. I'm going to put a link in the bottom description about political correctness infiltrating mainstream science, especially in regard to subjects like race. I'm also going to list my main source, which was an article called Erectus Walks Amongst Us. And I will also list each individual source listed in that article for every single gene. So, as always, thank you for watching, and if you can comment and critique my work, I would appreciate it.